So demographic data is basically data about you. Our questions are based on the ones that are used in the census every year, and also the protected characteristics listed in the Equality Act. And we've substituted them with some extra questions that are more sort of education specific. So widening participation is something that, as an organisation, Medical Schools Council is very interested in. So we've added some questions around that as well. So what we want to do is find out a little bit more how the AKT impacts on people who share protected characteristics. So the idea of doing that is not to say, oh, if you have this protected characteristic, you'll do worse in this exam. That's exactly not what we're saying at all. What we're trying to do is work out, because we know that differential attainment, so people performing differently in medical schools, is not about them as individuals. It's actually about the education and the opportunities they've received up until the point that they've taken this exam. So it's really important that we use this new national exam to benchmark what's happening to different demographics within medical schools. That means that we can go back and look at ways in which we might be able to put interventions in place so that everybody is able to reach their full potential.
I think the use of that information to be able to establish patterns and use that information to benefit future medical students, should there be any patterns that come through, would be really important.
It's good to see how the demographics changing, because especially in a place like the UK, there's so much more diversity nowadays. People are bringing in their own traditions and stuff, and like, for example, I'm Japanese, and like, I've got my own traditions, I've got my own values and stuff that I've been brought up with. Obviously, for me, I want my demographic to be like almost heard. I think that's why it's important, because then I'm able to basically say where I'm coming from, and then like in that way, maybe it's easier to standardize things.
It's using data-driven insights and being able to draw the conclusions from that, and being able to share that with the medical school so they can actually implement policy, which makes a difference for those future medical students if they need it.
It's a huge part of healthcare anyway. Like, having demographic data in the NHS is so important. The demographic data can be quite important for like things like raising concerns about discrimination and stuff. So we do have like an EDI team that uses that data to kind of see what's happening in the course.
I think having data and such a vast amount of data that you'll be able to gather over the years will be really important in having those kind of objective data-driven insights of who is sitting these exams, and kind of the performance that goes along potentially with some of that demographic data. And it allows for adjustments to be made. I think more importantly is having that information at the start to have that insight, and then being able to use that insight to change things is really important. I think generally speaking, overlaying data from other sources is never always the best way. There's always gaps there. And I think being able to deliver, data collection at the time of people doing the exams allows you to have a real kind of snapshot in time of who is sitting the exams, and be able to kind of directly compare that with performance. And then use that to then help medical schools in the future, whether it is, making adjustments, changing policy, hopefully will benefit kind of medical students for years to come as well. For the future, we want more doctors and more doctors who, stay doctors. And I think being able to understand not only, maybe who performs best. Me as a mature medical student, I always think it's really interesting if people do things kind of later in life and how they get on in comparison to their peers. But I also think, being able to support people better and being able to help people for the future to not only do it better in these exams with better support from their medical school, but also insights which can help their long-term career. Not only do we want to have more doctors, but have more people who stay doctors for the future.
I think it will help to identify like faults in the system. if there are any. I don't think it's the individual. I think it might have been the circumstances that they're raised in. So collecting the demographic data can be important for understanding, like for example, socioeconomic status. Like that could be a determinant in like how well you do in life in general.
Any data that can be, gathered and obtained and used for benefit of people long term, I think is going to be really important.
It's beneficial to understand, more about the person, because I guess in that way, as you move forward, the future will be brighter for people in the same kind of circumstance.
These data will be stored in a secure area within the Medical Schools Council's databases. Ultimately, these data will be shared with the GMC. But what I want to make really clear about all of the use of this data is it will not be shared in an identifiable way with anybody. So when it might be used in research, the researchers will get aggregate data. So they won't get the data along the line, so to speak. So it won't be your name, your surname, all of your bits about you. They will get numbers of people who share that characteristic. We're also really careful about what we call rounding protocols. So if there is only one person from a particular protected characteristic or with a particular data point, that doesn't get shared. So you would suppress that data and you would report back as that being 0. It's only when numbers get above 5 that you start reporting them. So there are lots of safeguards in place to make sure that none of this data is identifiable. You absolutely can opt out of giving this data. So how it will work is that you will have to complete the form, but for every data field, there is a prefer not to say option. So although you have to fill out the form, you don't have to give us your data. However, we hope that you will give us your data because it might not have an impact on you. You'll have taken the AKT and passed, hopefully, by the time we analyse it, but it might have an impact on generations to come. And it's about making sure that we can make education and training as fair as possible.
For a lot of these people, and me included, like, you don't want your identity to be mixed up with your ability. So I can see where they're coming from in terms of like, just because I am this or I believe in this doesn't mean that like I should be like compared against it on like a demographic data. You compare my results in a test and then you compare like who I am. But I think it would be better for the MSc to probably distinguish the two and be like, we are doing this for your benefit. It's not because we can see that there has been faults in the system. If there weren't, then we wouldn't be basically doing this demographic data collection. So it's kind of for your benefit, and maybe frame it in that light instead of being like, yes, we're going to see how well you've done and then, take your demographics and then put them together. It might be better to be like, oh, well, we're doing it for your benefit, and hopefully in the future we can do better by you.
The most important thing we as scientists kind of know and we think about often is that we use data all the time. Lots of research that we will be using not only in our medical school kind of exams or in our learning, but also for the future, is all based on people offering and sharing their data that we can interpret and use for the future to benefit other patients. So I think as a demographic, generally by doing medicine, we are scientists and we appreciate the value of data collection and kind of what amazing things can come from that. So I really think with regards to this, I know people can sometimes be nervous about sharing their data, but I think the intention for this is with great benefit to not only us as current medical students, but future medical students who benefit from being able to interpret this data and use it to help others.
there's an award gap, and we know that it's not, you know, like people from different, like ethnic minorities, like it's not because they lack the ability, it's because maybe the environment that they were taught in or brought up in or whatever. So I think maybe saying it in that way, you know, would be more positive. And then, you know, I think that more students would be more inclined to actually do it and be like, yeah, I want my voice to be heard.
We all understand the importance of, you know, data, being able to kind of make observations, being able to interpret that data and then use that for the benefit of others. You can only really do that by people offering to put their data forwards. And I think as it's in a anonymized private setting, then it'll be used for the future for others.